So, let's start with introductions. Who the devil are you?
We're K-Klass. I'm Paul.
I'm Bobby.
I'm Russ.
So, first thing we wanted to ask you about was to go back to the 80s, early 90s. What was it like in the house music scene back in the late 80s, particularly in Manchester?
Manchester, I mean, for us, it was just so different to where we came from. We lived in Chester, which is on the border with North Wales, on the English side of the border. Which there was never much going on in Chester, so we always gravitated to Manchester. The music, we made a point of coming here because we could hear new, exciting music that we wouldn't hear at home. I was working for a band at the time, and the drummer introduced me to a night in London called The Trip. We'd played with a band there, or I was just like the roadie. We'd played with the band there earlier that evening, and then that all finished, and later on it reopened as a club night, and it was Nicky Holloway's night, The Trip. And I went there, had a fantastic time, and somebody mentioned there that they were doing the same sort of thing was happening at the Hacienda at a night called Nude on the Friday, and I'd already been to the Hacienda to see New Order play and stuff like that, so I knew where it was, and knew the pedigree of the place. So the very next Friday that we had off from working with the band, I was there, walked through the doors, and was just blown away. But there'd been stuff going on. I mean, that was sort of February 1988. But there'd been stuff going on, as Bobby will explain, a lot longer than that.
Yeah, Manchester was like vibrant when I started. My big sister, she introduced me to going out clubbing. Obviously, there were so many clubs in Manchester to choose from back then. It was like literally, where are we going tonight? But when Hacienda came, we used to go midweek, which was usually on a Wednesday or a Thursday. They'd have like a bit of dance and R&B, which was quite cool. It wasn't packed, but it was okay. And then obviously we started hearing house music. We didn't know it was house music then, but I thought, oh my God, this is really cool. Do you know what I mean? And my boyfriend at the time was a dancer, so he used to go out dancing all around Manchester and everywhere else. And he used to go to Hacienda and dance in there. And he'd always come back and bring new music, and we'd be like, what is this? What he plays? It's amazing.
He was part of Foot Patrol, who were
he was part of Foot Patrol, which
legendary Manchester dance
a dance band that used to go in there. So we started going on the Friday nights, and it was just like, to me it was just the most golden time, because you'd be standing in the queue, you'd make new friends in the queue, you'd go in, and everyone just knew why we were in there. And when the music was on, we'd all be looking at each other. We wouldn't be talking, we'd just be looking at each other going, because it was just, the music was just amazing in there, and the atmosphere, and everyone in there was so friendly. And we used to go every Friday, but sometimes they wouldn't let me in because they thought I was too young, which I wasn't at the time. And I'd stand in the queue and they'd be like, please let me in. And sometimes they would, and once I got in there, it was just the best.
The whole acid house explosion, though, was just so different to anything, certainly me and Russ had experienced where we lived anywhere before. In Chester, people went to nightclubs to cop off, get drunk, and probably have a kebab and a fight music at the end of the night.
It was all about music.
And it was crazy the first couple of times that we went to Manchester. There was still this stupid mentality that, from where we lived, that if you weren't from that town and you were in a nightclub, you could end up getting your lights punched out at the end of the night. So the first couple of times we went there, we actually left before the end, like fearing that there might be people like that outside. But if we'd have stayed that extra 10 minutes, we'd have found out that the end of the night was the complete opposite to that, and people were just hugging and loving each other at the end of the night. It was the first time we'd ever been to a nightclub that was based around music, primarily above anything else, music and dancing, rather than getting drunk and copping off. And to us, wasn't it? It was a revelation.
Well, it was special. It was special.
From the way you describe it, everyone has that moment of like, this is where I should be.
Yeah, because we'd all look at each other. We didn't have to say nothing, but everyone would just look at each other, and we just knew what we were thinking. And it was just like, this is just the best. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? The feeling was amazing.
I'll never forget the feeling of walking into that, that venue. Do you know what I mean? It gives me pins and needles thinking about it now. You know, first of all, you just hear the dull thud of the bass and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's like
as you get
great
closer,
big
it's
sort of,
getting loud.
you know, it was almost like being in a warehouse, but you know, the most brilliantly designed warehouse you've ever seen in your life. You know, the sound wasn't incredible in there, but it lent itself to the kind, you know, that kind of industrial feel of the music that was being played. You know, I was aware of house music way before I went to the Hacienda. You know, I'd been hearing about it, you know, since about sort of 1986, 87. I'd been reading about it. You know, the first UK radio DJ I heard playing house music was actually John Peel. Believe it or not, you know, he played eclectically right across the board. He was playing house music and imports from Chicago and stuff like that.
Else knew about it.
You know, before most people even knew what it was. But you know, back in the day, you know, people sort of don't get it now that, you know, pre-internet, if you wanted to hear a record and you didn't have that record, the only way you could hear, you know, and only a certain DJ had that record, you had to go to that certain club where that DJ that owned that piece. You know, your only way of hearing that track was to go and hear a certain DJ play. You know, I'd do crazy things like, you know, Stu Allen used to have a radio show on it was Piccadilly, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Piccadilly 103. And the only way I could pick it up in Chester where I lived was having this piece of copper cable and wrapped right around in a loop around the top of my bedroom, and the signal would fade in and out, and I'd be there like taping the tracks and stuff like that. And Saturday morning you'd excitedly get on the train and come to Manchester and, you know, sort of try and identify the tracks.
It's the
and
same
buy
with
them.
going into record shops as well. I used to get up, there used to be a shop called Spinning, and I used to go in there, but I'd always be the only girl in the shop. It'd be rammed full of men buying their tunes, and I'd just walk in there, they'd all be like looking at me, and I'd be like, have you got this? And they'd be like, no, it's on import, I'll order it for you. And I just used to order stuff from import. And even if it was just one tune, I'd just buy the whole album just so I could have that one tune on the album. So I'd spend like loads of money just on one album, just for one tune. But yeah, that was my Saturday afternoons.
I'd say Manchester was all vibrant, like say, but in 1988, you know, when the acid house exploded, it was like a match made in heaven. There was the sort of dance heritage of the city, which, you know, goes right back to the being like a big West Indian community in South Manchester, Moss Side. You know, so the heritage was there. The heritage was there with the Northern Soul scene, which was already massive. And then when this new music came along, and a new drug that nobody had taken before came along, it was just like, you know, the only way I can describe it is like someone putting petrol on a barbecue. The place just went up, and like almost overnight things changed, and the Hacienda went from being half full to being queues round the corner. Yeah, we used to be able
People
to sit
getting turned away.
Yeah, we used to be able to sit over the road in the City Road in Tavern, which is still there, having a drink and just waiting for the queue to start forming. And then, you know, we'd sort of drift over when we saw people starting to go in. But, you know, within the space of 2 months, you'd arrive there at 8 o'clock at night and the queue would already be right round the corner to the street behind and stuff like that. And we were having to get there like earlier and earlier and earlier. You know, there'd be enough people in the queue for the venue to fill the venue before the doors opened. It was by the height of it, wasn't it? By
There was
89.
a lot of people getting turned away, and they weren't happy.
Yeah.
They literally weren't happy.
Let's talk about Cream. So, how was it back in the day? Compare it to now.
Cream, well, the very first event at Cream was actually my girlfriend at the time's 21st birthday party. I went to school with a guy called Darren Hughes, who was one of the original owner, or the original promoter of Cream, along with James Barton.
He was managing us at the time.
Yeah, he was our manager at the time as well. He used to be involved with stuff at Quadrant Park in Liverpool, later the 051 in Liverpool, which are like iconic clubs there. And it was my girlfriend's 21st birthday party. Darren had ideas of putting a club night on, and we've on one of my birthday parties in March 1991 would it have been. We went out on a Tuesday night in Liverpool. There was nowhere else open. It's like 11 o'clock. There was one student night at a place called the Academy in Liverpool. It was the only place that was open. We walked in there, and it was just like a dark, they only had the back room open. It was like a dark square room with not much in there, and a, you know, kind of big but average sound system.
The annex.
And which later went on to be the annex in Cream. But we walked in, we said we could do something in here. So we said, like, let's put Sarah's 21st birthday party on in here. We attracted all, there was a lot, she was at uni there, sort of doing art. So we had a good crowd of people, and, you know, a good crowd of regular clubbers. that came along. It's a really nice mixed crowd, sort of mixed gay, straight students, a few local scallies, a few reprobates, but everyone, that was the great thing about the acid house scene, is everybody just came and partied together. It was really, really good. So we attracted a nice crowd. A month later, Darren Hughes' girlfriend's 21st birthday came up, so we did the same thing again. The same people came, but more this time. And the people at the club said, when the students come back in September, would you like to put a night on? So they started doing the night. They called it Cream. That was the birth of it. It fell right around the time that Rhythm is a Mystery was a hit, didn't it? I was like torn between carrying on sort of doing this thing Cream with Darren and James or the band, and in the end I had to say to them, listen guys, I'm going to have to bow out, I can't give it the time that it needs. And that was the end of that, which was probably not my wisest business decision ever, but the way that said, the way things have gone with K-Klass over the years, I wouldn't change a thing. But obviously Cream developed. Russ was DJing there before me, wasn't he? One of the very early sort of warm-up residents there.
Yeah, there was did one of the early parties. Was it Sarah's? Which one was Sarah's?
Yeah, you did both. Sarah's birthday
parties. Yes, before the actual club.
Yeah, you actually DJ'd on the opening night as well, didn't you? I think.
No, because we did that live.
We were over the water in Birkenhead.
Yeah, it was in October 1992.
Yeah, we did that live thing over
Birkenhead, wasn't it, somewhere?
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah,
but you did some of the you DJ'd at some of the very early nights there. I was sort of like, I had like a record collection and stuff, but I was more interested at the time in the production side of things.
There's a funny story how we made Paul DJ
for the first time.
We was on tour in Australia, and the guys asked us in the club. Before the club, the guys asked us. They said, "We'd like you to do a DJ set after with the band. We'd perform live." We said, "We've got no records," so they took us down to the record shop in Adelaide, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just got a load of records. Just have a load, and just borrow one for the night, and so Paul started playing, and we were in an area for the band just on the next floor up, and Carl and Andy, the other two guys, said to me, they said, "Shouldn't you go and give Paul a break?" And my reaction was, "I loves it, loves DJ." So we wandered off. I left Paul in the club playing. Paul had a handful of records he literally had to play all night. He learnt on his feet, so to speak.
I've never DJ'd out my bedroom in my life. I had about 30 pieces of vinyl, and they just left me there playing on them. It was like a baptism of fire. I was like digging out third tracking B-side mixes and stuff like that. But then by sort of late 96, we were sort of doing bits and bobs of DJing together, and there was a DJ from Liverpool called John Kelly, who was really, really sort of popular in the mid to late 90s. He was doing a lot of stuff at all the parties in London, and he was ill for a weekend and couldn't make his gigs, so they said, why don't we send you and Russ down to cover his gigs for the weekend as K-Klass DJs.
I think that was before 96, I think that would have been 94.
Yeah, well, it was mid-90s anyway, and we covered his gigs and everyone loved what we did, and then that was it. The sort of the DJing side of K-Klass was born then. But Cream, we ended up with residencies for years at Cream. We played, with
still do stuff with them now.
Still to this day. I mean, now we produce, as well as being on their tour, in the Cream Classics tour, we actually do a Cream Classical show with an orchestra, which is it's probably the biggest orchestra show as a production out of all of them. In that we have like a 50-piece orchestra, 40-piece choir, 8 vocalists, loads of other musicians and stuff like that. And if you'd have told me back in the day when we first started going to the Hacienda that I'd end up producing an orchestra show and working with the calibre of musicians that we work with there, I'd have probably laughed.
But from our personal point of view as well, with the Hacienda, was actually a highlight was DJing. Not only the DJing side of it, it's performing live.
Yeah, the amount of times Bobby performed
Bobby, I think, holds a record for actually personal
on the
live
stage on
performances. For live performances.
Yeah, because if you add up all the information that's supplied in, the various different Hacienda books, but there's 2 of them that had like gig listings of who'd played and when. If you add all the data from that together, we were actually neck and neck with the Happy Mondays. But Bobby then performed in there with another band called Khalif, and then since the 2 subsequent parties where
Oh yeah, the
They've,
party, yeah,
they've done the
birthdays,
parties on
innit?
the site of the Hacienda in the in what is
The
the car
30th
park.
and the 40th, yeah.
Bobby's performed at both of
Both of
those.
them, yeah.
So in terms of like performances on stage at the Hacienda, Bobby's probably performed them more times than any other artist. She was also the first vocalist to perform at Nation, Cream's venue
Cream,
in
yeah.
Liverpool,
Yeah.
And the last.
and the very last one
Yeah.
as well there.
Yeah.
So she's got a few honours in terms of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff.
Mm.
Yeah. We wanted to go back to the very start. How did you guys come
Meet.
together, and what kind of shaped your sound back at the start?
Right, so at very first, I was working for an indie band again, just guitar roading and stuff like that. But after these visits to these clubs, I became fascinated with dance music. Well, dance music wasn't really my thing before then. The nearest I got to it was I liked New Order. Well, I was obsessive about New Order.
Yeah.
I went to every single gig for about 2.5 years in the UK. I was like the little starry-eyed kid at the front of the stage, sort of staring up at them. I'd hitchhike to gigs. I'd, sort of sleep on railway stations overnight. Everything.
What about when they threw you over the fence at Glastonbury?
Oh yeah, I
I
had to pay some Hells Angels 20 quid to throw me over a fence at Glastonbury in 1987 to get in and watch them there. Ended up landing in a cowpath, dislocating my ankle and paying 20 quid for the privilege. But again, I got to see them. So I was a little bit obsessive about them. So that was as near as I got to dance music. But obviously when I was working for this band, I got introduced properly to house music, even though I'd known it had been around for a while. And I'd started going to Hacienda, and I got made redundant from British Telecom because I used to go every Wednesday and every Friday. Every Thursday I'd be late into work. If I was offered overtime on a Saturday, I'd be just not there, I wouldn't bother showing up. So sooner or later they got sick of me and kind of didn't sack me, but made me redundant. I got my redundancy money and bought like a really cheap Yamaha keyboard and a Roland TR-505 to try and make the music that I was hearing in the club, because it sounded like my dad went. I went and spent all my redundancy money on that. And my dad went absolutely crazy and nearly like threatening to kick me out, telling me I was stupid. I think when we had our first hit record, it's the only time in his life he's ever admitted that was right. But and then one night at the Hacienda, I saw Russ in there. Now I knew Russ from around Chester and watching football matches and stuff like that, and going to football matches together years ago. Usually getting into a few scrapes and things like that, to be honest with you. We'd not seen each other in ages, and we just got chatting. I'm like, oh, what are you doing here? He's like, what are you doing here? We had the same interest. And then Russ had a couple of little bits of equipment, and with another friend of his called Gary, who had a little bit more equipment, we did our first ever track, which was actually, well, it was at your mum's house, wasn't it?
At my mum's house, yeah. Because Gary was heavily influenced by a certain ratio. He absolutely adored. Yeah, Gary was. Yeah, he was absolutely worshipped a certain ratio. Probably in the same way that Paul was with you. Gary, was a big certain ratio fan. So that was where kind of that side of things came from.
But again, the influences were coming from Manchester. We were always looking to Manchester at the time, before we lived there, and sort of gravitating towards it. But we just had, this equipment laid. We didn't even have keyboard stands. We just had it laid out on the floor, and which bits we could connect together with MIDI cables. We did a couple of really sort of rough tracks where we were trying to make house music, but it didn't really sound like it. But there used to be another club in Chester called the Blast Club, run by a guy called John Locke, on a Thursday night, and he'd bring DJs in from Manchester. I think Graham Park even played there a couple of times. Alistair certainly played.
Alistair played there, yeah, definitely.
And then one night 808 State were playing there. Was it supporting the show? No, it's just 808 State were playing, headlining one of their very early live gigs. They had all the equipment. But there was a local band from Wrexham in there who were all set up as well. And there was just two lads from Wrexham. It's turned out in a band called Interstate. It turned out to be Carl and Andy, who were the other original members of K-Klass. We watched them, and we actually preferred what they did to 808 State, because to us it sounded more like the music we were hearing in the Hacienda. It was more American, sort of Detroit techno influenced what they were doing. And we got chatting to them at the end of the night, said, oh yeah, we're doing something similar. And the conversation came and went. And the next night, that was on a Thursday night, and the very next night, again, without fail, we were in the Hacienda for noon night, and they were in there. I said, oh, I didn't realise you came here as well. I said, oh yeah, we got chatting. Again, we realised then that we were a bit more serious about, what we were talking about, and they said, "Oh, come back to our studio in Wrexham." So at 2 o'clock the club finished. We actually stayed till the end of the night this time. We drove back in the car, probably a little bit wider awake than we would have normally been at 2 o'clock in the morning. Got in, and their studio turned out to be a spare room in Andy's mum and dad's house. And we got in the studio and he had a Roland TR-909. We turned that on, we hit the bass drum on that, and it's like, wow, that's it, that's the sound we were looking for. Yeah, we heard the sounds off this drum machine. It's like, now we can do it. Do you know what I mean? Now we can actually make this music. You know, I know what to do now. We've got all the ideas, but now we've got the actual sounds we were looking for. And we we started that night, and over the course, it was only about 2 or 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks, yeah. Gary kind of got, not disillusioned, he just
fell by the wayside.
Fell by the wayside, really, without really, there was nothing.
Yeah, and there was another guy that was working with them who again at the same time got disillusioned, but it also ended up just the four of us, which was Andy Williams, Carl Thomas, Russ and myself. And we put 4 tracks together over that period, mastered them onto a chrome cassette because that's all we could afford. You know, we'd go out the weekend. There was like almost like a punk ethos about it, that if you had a few quid, you know, or you robbed and blagged a couple of quid, you know, sort of blagged some bits of equipment, hired some stuff for the weekend to record to, a couple of reverb units and stuff like that, you could patch together a track. So over the course of these 3 weeks, lots of bus trips to Wrexham and back, and you know, when Russ would drive up there and stuff like that, we got like a 4-track EP together, and we took them into Eastern Bloc
on a chrome cassette.
Yeah, it was a chrome cassette.
On a chrome cassette.
We took them into Eastern Bloc Records on Oldham Street, which is where we used to go to buy the bulk of our music every Saturday, because we heard they had a record label. We played them the tracks off chrome cassette, and they said, "Oh, they're incredible, we'll put them out as they are." They said, "Well, you can't put them out." He said, "Oh, no." I said, "No, we'll go into the studio." So it took about a year to sort of remaster and make the tracks properly by the time they actually came out. But the first question they said, "What's the name of your band?" and "What are the tracks called?" We haven't got a name. He said, "What your tracks called?" I said, "Well, 1, 2, 3 and 4 at the moment." I was like, "Come on, lads." At least try. So he said, "Right, we're going to have to go away and think of a name." So I said, "I don't know, what should we call ourselves?" Yeah. And we came up with the idea of getting a dictionary, letting the dictionary fall open on a page, and then whatever the word was on the top of the top left-hand page, we'd base the name of the band around, and it fell open on M. And the word was masturbation. So it was back to the drawing board. I think K-Klass, the name actually came, it was just a homage to John Peel, really, because he used to talk about a lot of American hip-hop bands at the time spelling the name with a K instead of a C. I mean, there was no hidden meaning or anything to it like that. It was just, you know, a name that we liked the sound of, so it's K and then Klass with a K.
People have tried to find a hidden meaning, haven't they? Say, "Oh, it must mean something."
No.
Mean anything?
There was actually a type of a type of British submarine that was called K-Klass, but they were steam powered and they weren't very good.
They sank.
Yeah, we actually found a book about, and apparently like there's 20 of them, all of which were either blown up, destroyed or sank. Yeah. And the last 2 of them ended where one of them was coming off repair at Barrow, and the other one was coming back in to be scrapped, and they crashed into each other and sank. And the summing up line of the book was, "Without doubt, K-Klass for a total disaster," which is a motto we've carried.
We've tried to keep that. That's not the only thing we've kept
throughout our career. But no, that's where the name come from. But obviously, we finally released the first EP. We toured as a 4-piece sort of instrumental act with 808 State on their first tour, which was an incredible experience. That really taught us the ropes about touring and, you know, being part of a band. I had basic knowledge through the indie bands I worked for, but it was a real, you know, positive time where we learned things from those guys.
We made friends for life as well, then with the guys as well.
With 808 State,
with MC Tunes, you knew Tunes anyway as well.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, my neighbour. He's my next door neighbour.
Yeah. That's, you know, we did the first EP. It got released and it went to like number 61 in the charts. The lead track was called Wildlife. And it got to like, I think, 61 in the national charts just off the back of being sold off vans around the independent shops that were chart registered. So Eastern Bloc said, "Right, next time, come back, why don't you do a vocal?" The music that we were hearing in Hacienda was going a lot more vocal. It was moving away from the acid house and sort of Detroit techno and bleepy 303s and stuff. And it was becoming a lot more sort of US house, sort of vocal, soulful kind of sounds were coming through. We were really feeling all of that. So we'll do a vocal track. So we got introduced to Bobby, by our sound engineer was a guy called Mark Stagg, who worked at Spirit Studios in Manchester. He was an instrumental sort of, he was beyond a mix engineer, he was more of a producer. As well as being a genius mix engineer, who understood all the equipment, he understood the sound. He introduced us to Bobby. Bobby was from a really vibrant area in Manchester where, like MC Tunes, a guy called Gerald, and a load of other people, they all lived like on the same street or within the same couple of streets. Yeah. And we were introduced, Bobby already sort of understood and felt house music, she had a longer history in it than we did at the time. And we made our first track, didn't we? But like you say, where you lived at the time, it was crazy, wasn't it?
Wicked.
Yeah.